Continue on. You got to keep in mind 62. We're going to go over 62:12 later on, but 62:11 you got to keep in mind because what you have here is a definition of a deficiency, right? And this reveals something that we talked about a few hours ago about your filing returns, what you've been doing all these years. Thinking it's one thing when quite possibly it could be another. All right, now we have this response from Michael Perkins, who's a disclosure officer. Remember Michael Perkins? He was the first one that sent us the delegation order with all the numbers of the returns on it. Remember him? All right. Well, at this time, we had a lot of members. We were putting out letters to them, and they were calling us, and we were telling them to go ahead and request these delegation orders. You might need them. All right, at that time. And so people were sending in requests for these delegation orders. And that's what this lady up in Philadelphia did. That's all she did was send in a FOIA request for a copy of the delegation order. And she got this response back from Perkins. Please be advised, this delegation order may be inappropriate in your case. Well, how in the world does he know what her case is? Right? All she did was make a FOIA request. She didn't say anything else but send me the document. There is a process by which a substitute return consisting of page 1 of Form 1040, which shows your name, address, Social Security number, and no line item amounts may be appropriate. All right, now let's see how this is appropriate. Such substitutes for return are not executed by a district or service center director or other authorized Internal Revenue Service officer or employee pursuant to Higher Code 6020B. Is that right? Huh? Such substitute for returns are not executed. Well, they're not, right? We saw that. By district director, service center director, or other authorized Internal Revenue Service officers or employee pursuant to 6020B. Well, 6020B says it has to be what? Has to be. What does 6020B say the return has to be? Executed. It has to be signed. And these are not signed, right? The service is not required to file a return for a taxpayer who fails or refuses to do so before issuing a notice of deficiency. What's he saying there?
He's writing his own code.
He's writing something, is he? What is he? Everybody understand what he's saying? You don't understand that? Huh?
You're supposed to file before you file for deficiency.
You have to file a return for a deficiency, right?
Yeah.
So if you file the return, it says the service is not required to file a return for a taxpayer who fails or refuses to do so before issuing a notice of deficiency.
Well, you have to file before you get the deficiency.
Well, that makes sense, don't it? It makes sense because you already filed a return if there was a deficiency. If there was no return, there was no deficiency. But what does this have to do with her case? All right, now, section, huh?
She didn't say what her case was.
No, well, this doesn't even relate to any of this, does it? All right. Section 6020B does not make it mandatory that the service file a return for a taxpayer before issuing a statutory notice of deficiency.
But it does, doesn't it?
It does?
I mean, you can't have a deficiency without having a filing.
Well, that's right, but this lady requested a delegation order that was under the authority of 6020B, enumerating returns that can be filed under 6020B. And he's talking to her about does not make it mandatory for the service to file a return for a taxpayer before issuing a statutory notice of deficiency. What code section is this? 6020B is execute a return, right, for someone who fails to do so. And this one here, for notice of deficiency, is what section?
6211 to 212?
Well, the definition is 6211 and 6212. That's right. So that's, he's talking about two code sections, and when the latter, when having no relation whatsoever to the delegation order in question. Right? What do you call it when people talk like this? Double talk, gobbledygook. In other words, he's trying to take advantage of your possible and presumed ignorance of the law. So if you didn't know any of this and you read this, you say, oh, I see. Okay. All right, right? And that's what he's trying to do. Of course, he failed in this case, but be that as it may. Huh? Right, he's kind of more, that's right. Kind of wanted. All right, now we're going to show you a form that starts it all when you don't file. It's called a taxpayer delinquency investigation. It's a hard copy form that's used within the Internal Revenue Service. The form is TYD 14. All right? And here's, this is out of the 5400, which is Service Center Collection Branch Procedure in that manual. And you can see the returns that are used in the example. 941, 1120, 7020, 940, 949, and 1120 again. Now, you don't find any 1040s, right, in the example.
What does the TYD mean?
That's just the title of it, TYD 14. All right? And employee number, you have your transaction codes right here. See, 150s mean the return is filed and assessed. Now, remember we were talking about in the computer codes. Now, this starts it out. Without this, they can't start a computer investigation. Okay? And we were talking about the computer codes, which we're about to get into. And in this case, what we're going to show you, or try to show you, is that it is impossible under IRS procedure to investigate a United States citizen, a State of the Union, an individual. The computer will not allow for it. The code will not allow for it. So in order for them to investigate you, what they have to do is they have to lie to the computer. And they start here. I see some of the caseworkers sitting around there going like this, you know, because they do this work, and they know what I'm getting at, what I'm talking about, because they handle the letters where they're lying to them all the time. Mm-hmm. But anyway, they have to enter business codes to get the computer to go forward. So when you get your computer file, your IMF file, individual master file, which you have, the file is individual in name only. Most of the codes on there are all business codes. In fact, that's where we really drove that home at that trial we had in Baltimore a year or so ago.
What does the ACS mean that was on the form you had just before that?
Automated collection services. Right. All right. Now what we have here is a document which you can receive by calling that 800 number. 800 form, I think, 1040 form. And it's a catalog of federal tax forms, form letters, and notices. It's publication 676. It's revised every February. So it's like April or May, you can start ordering the next year. And we use this around here quite often because it lists all the forms and letters and their purposes. Here we have in this particular issue, which is 1988, a functional description on page 71. And it takes a TYD 14. It says, notice that IRS has no record of receiving the business returns listed. So your TYD 14 starts an investigation into what file? Business master file. So, but they use this for individuals. Now, that's where we had them last year when we had their expert on the stand in court. And at the top of the IDRS transcripts, there was a 3-digit code. There was a 515. Now, the 515 is the first TDI. The TDI, Taxpayer Delinquency Investigation. That's the first letter they send you is CP, computer paragraph 515. And I had him on the stand, and I had the IDRS. We had already introduced it into evidence. And I said to the gentleman, I think his name was Russell, I said, what is the CP code at the top of that IDRS transcript? And he looked all around. He said, I don't see it. So I walked over and I pointed up to the corner. I said, what's this say right here? He says, it says 515. I said, is there a CP in front of that? He said, yes, there is. I said, okay. I said, will you please turn to the 6209 manual? And we went to the part that dealt with CP codes. And I said, now, would you please read from this section? And the section dealt with individuals. And it said very clearly in the section that CP codes for individuals had 2 digits. And then I took him to the next section where it dealt with businesses, and it said the CP code for businesses has 3 digits. And I took him back to the IDRS transcript, and I said, now would you please tell me how many digits are in the 515? He says, but that is a different kind of CP code. I said, oh, it's a different kind of CP code, huh? Okay. Let's go to the glossary of 6209. So we go to the glossary. I said, now go to page 2 and look 11 down from the top. And he went there, and I said, what does that say? It says CP code, computer paragraph definition. I said, now where's the CP code that you're talking about? And he looked back at the government's attorney, he looked over at the IRS attorney, and he's looking at them. And they're going like this. I said, come on, show me your CP code that you just said is a different code from that one. Where's that at? And he just sat there with his face getting red. You know? Because this is what they do. They lie to the computer. He probably didn't even realize he lied to the computer all these years. It's been my experience that these people have never looked at the law. They do the job as they've been shown the job. We can tell this with the responses that we get back from them. Like the response you just saw coming from Michael Perkins. I mean, it was nonsensical. It didn't make any sense at all. And we found that to be the case. All right, now, we're moving on with the same investigation on this particular assessment. And what I did was, I requested all the documents in my IMF file, my individual master file, by their document locator numbers. Evidently, if it's a document locator number, it identifies a document, right? Just like you saw, it identified the substitute for a return not long ago. All right, so we requested every one of the documents that are identified by the document locator numbers, 41 of them in all. So I should have got at least 41 documents. Here's one of the responses I got back. In response to your letter dated February 6 concerning prior requests, as a result of further search, we found and are enclosing a copy of document so-and-so. We are unable to secure the following documents. Regarding your 6103E request, dated November 3rd, 88, we found no record of Form 3212 or any Forms TYD 14. Now, anybody know what a 3212 is?
Investigation?
It's an investigation, right. What kind of investigation?
Criminal.
Criminal investigation, that's correct. This is in November of 88. In December of 87, they came around and rapped on my door and tried to read me my rights and told me I was under criminal investigation. So the way this happens, the collection branch, or the examination branch, takes and executes a 3212 form as a fraud referral to CID, Criminal Investigation Division. And that starts the investigation. So I asked them for the form, and I knew there was an investigation because they read me my rights. And here they're telling me they can't produce the form. Now, the form TYD-14, there had to be one of them to start the investigation for anything else to come, because that's the first document that's executed. Now they tell me they can't produce any of them. And right up here they show you that they're probably telling the truth here, because they either are not going to produce it because they have it listed. This document locator number right there identifies a form TYD-14. Let's look at examine it. The first two digits of a document locator number identify the office in which the document originated in. So you got 28 is Philadelphia and 52 is Baltimore. The third digit of a document locator number identifies the tax class. Here, 2 is income tax. Now, the next two digits are called the document code. They identify the document that the number identifies. And here, a 14 stands for TYD-14. The next three digits are called the Julian date. The Julian date is the date that the document is executed on, 365 days in a year, right? Well, how can that be when this one says 723? Do we have 723 days in a year? No. Well, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Is this more IRS gobbledygook? Right? No, not really. What they do, if two documents are executed on the same day for the same person that can be confused with one another, they'll add 400 to one of the Julian dates. So in this instance, it's 323rd day of the year. Okay? So you just subtract 400. The next three digits is called the blocking series, or the explanation for the use of the document. The next two digits are the location of the document on the 813 index form, which is a form where all the documents are stored. They attach 100 documents to every 813 index form, and they store it in the Service Center accounting branch. And here, this would be the fourth document, because they go from 00 to 99. And then the last digit after the dash is the year in question, and they always go in a decade. And so, with that in mind, we understand that. Let's go forward and start seeing what they do with these document locator numbers. Of course, you know the IMF, if it says by document locator number that a document exists, the document has to exist, right? All right, so I wrote back to Mr. Price in Philadelphia, and I said on your February 22nd, 1980 response to my February 6th letter, additional inquiry about an October 31st, 88 FOI request, did not give any reason why the 20 documents identified by document locator numbers could not be secured. Would you please forward the forms that you used to request these documents internally and the forms that you received back in response to that request? Right? I want to see what they're telling one another internally, right? Makes sense. The documents that you have forwarded, 9 in number, are not the documents that I requested. I requested the documents which are identified by the document locator numbers. I submitted not the transaction record thereof. Please send to me the copies of the executed IRS forms. The document locator numbers on the transaction records are as follows. You additionally stated in your letter that you did not find any TYD-14 attached as a copy of the page from the 1986 Internal Revenue Document 6209. Now, 6209, as we said, decodes computer files. In Section 1124, notice the highlighted reference to the Form TYD-14. Also attached is 2 pages copied from the IMF NCC transcript complete pertaining to me. recorded on 3/31/88 for the years 78, 79, 80, and 82. Notice the highlighted status indicators. According to these indicators, forms TYD14 were executed on 4/19/82 and 3/26/84. An indicator 6 TDI status was executed on 9/28/81. All three of these documents contain information about me. Sir, would you please send me these documents? What do you think they think when they get a letter from an individual like that? I'm talking about their computer files. Do you think that makes them feel comfortable? All right. Now, this is what I sent to them as exhibits. Let's see, this is section 11, page 24 of 6209, which decodes computer codes. And it says down here for a TDI status, when you have an indicator 3, or I'm sorry, an indicator 5 rather, with a stat 03, it means integrated data retrieval system is in taxpayer delinquency investigation status, and the TDI issued with this module, a module was a particular year within the computer, included on TDI form TYD14. So when you have the indicator code of 5 with a stat 3 on an IMF transcript, it means a form TYD14 was executed to start an investigation for a taxpayer delinquency investigation. Everybody understand that? All right, now you have a 6, indicator 6 with a 0 stat 3. The integrated data retrieval system is in taxpayer delinquency investigation status. This module does not appear on form on TYD14 because a TYD14 was previously issued. For other modules, the module will appear on the dial. So it's a supplemental thing. All right, now let's go to the transcript and see where these things are located, and a little bit about the transcript itself. Here's what an IMF transcript looks like for an individual. See, IMF NCC stands for National Computer Center Transcript Complete. Means the whole history of his assessment record, complete. They have a literal where they give you their version of the codes. And they have a specific, which is for a specific year, and they have a complete, which is the whole file. So in this instance, we ask for the complete file. All right, now, this starts a module right here, your IMF codes, your MFR codes, rather. MFT codes, I'm sorry. Your MFT code starts a module. That's your tax period. MFT code is 30, which means 1040 returns. So this whole module is about a 1040 return. The year is 82, and of course the 12th month. Now notice over here we have a -Z, which means that there's a Z freeze on my file because I'm under criminal investigation as of 3/31/88. That Z tells every other branch not to enter my file unless they contact Criminal Investigation Division and have their authorization to get into my file. Now, when you come down, you have your transaction codes. There's a 140 with a 0 and a 595, which is the TYD14 transaction code, 595. And that carries over to the year 84. And there's the document locator number right here. See it? Philadelphia and it's tax class 2, and document is TYD14, which matches up. And that TYD14 was 8/22/84. When we come down here, we have the MF Stat 3 with a 5 indicator, and it has a number of 3/26/84, March 26, 1984. And we come over and there's the year 84, so it all matches up. So that means there was a taxpayer delinquency investigation started there, and I'm under criminal investigation. And there's your document locator number up here. Actually, this one here is a bad IMF. Because in this module, in between the MFT code and the MF stat codes, you have all your transaction codes, which are 3 digits. And when you have a Z freeze, there should be a transaction code 914 here, which means criminal investigation. So this one here is a, is a bad module, just showing how erratic they are when they take and do these codes. Here's another page from that same transcript, 33188. And this one here is for 79. It's still 1040 with the 30 code. And we're still under investigation, and we're still under criminal investigation, and it still lacks a 914. See it? There's no 914. So, but when we come down, we have a 6 indicator with a stat 3, which brings us back with a 595 for the same TYD 14 form right here, which they cannot produce. So what does that mean about this computer transcript? Is it factual? Is the computer file right?
No.
What is the law of presumption?
Well, if you don't say anything about it, then it's presumed correct.
Now, what is the law of presumption? There's a law, a principle of law called presumption. What is that?
Presumed innocent. Yes.
Well, everybody's presumed innocent in the criminal case, but we're talking about a civil matter here. What is the law of presumption? What's the principle called the law of presumption?
I think it's pertaining to government agencies. If they make an allegation and you rebut it, then the proof of the allegation falls on their shoulders.
Well, yeah, well, if you rebut it, well, if you challenge it, they have to rebut your challenge.
Right, and if they don't, it's presumed correct?
Well, what is the, you're going to agree with that?
That's what I was going to say, that if they make a challenge to you and you leave it go and don't rebut it, then it is presumed to be that
they're correct, or whoever rebuts stands, or if it is not rebutted.
then it's presumed that you agree with what they're saying.
All right, in this case, the law of presumption, if a document says something exists, such as a computer transcript, and it can't be produced, then under the law of presumption, it's presumed it never existed. They say, everybody understand that? To say that it exists when it can't be produced would be an irrebuttable presumption, which is illogical and unlawful. There can never be an irrebuttable presumption. Something is presumed to be correct until it is proved otherwise. So in this case, we're what? What are we doing?
Buddy.
We're proving otherwise, right? Because if I had not requested the documents that these numbers identified, then it would be presumed they exist. But being that I requested the documents and now they can't be produced, it's presumed that they never existed. And if the documents never existed, and this is an assessment record, what does that mean?
No assessment.
It was never an assessment, right? That's very simple, isn't it?
Right. They give you a loan that wasn't there.
Well, they do that quite often. All right, now what we have here is a transaction record. This is what they were sending me for the documents that I was requesting. It's called a transaction record. It's a record of a transaction of an entry into a computer. And then, now I showed you what a TYD 14 looks like, right? And this one here is for a TYD 14, and they're trying to tell me this is the document that I requested. So that's why I wrote back and I said, I want the document I requested, not the transaction record thereof. So far, the only thing they've produced for me are transaction records. All right, you see what I'm talking about? Now, he responds. This is in response to your letter March 6, 89, concerning your request for document locator number TYD 14. We have reviewed the listing of 20 documents and found that additional duplicate document, so-and-so, and 12 of the remaining 19 could not be found and 7 were destroyed. The final summary is as follows. Duplicate erroneous numbers 5, destroyed 15, forwarded 9. They're still contending that the transaction records were documents forwarded. Cannot find 12, total 41. He goes on to say, your request for document locator numbers did not specify the period of each document.
She says it in the number.
The number tells him, doesn't it? Huh? Now, he should have known by now that I knew that was a barefaced lie. Why even say that? The man has to be what?
Grasping at straws.
No, he has to be ignorant of what he's writing.
That's true.
He's looking at them.
Evidently, he doesn't even know what he's writing when he's writing the letter. I mean, what do we have in this country is the blind leading what? I have some more evidence of that to show you. We'll probably get to it tonight. We have the blind leading the blind. I mean, no wonder we're in trouble. All right? And was further complicated by your inclusion of several duplicate erroneous numbers. We normally reject such a request, but try to perfect it ourselves for processing. You're really a nice guy. Due to the encompassing nature of the request, what does he mean by that? Huh? We were very careful in processing it in order to assure that a thorough search was made. He probably realized we were going to use it in this videotape and was going to go over the country. And we're going to make him immortal. We were also unable to find any Form TYD-14 documents. We have exhausted all means of search and are sorry we're unable to help you any further in this matter. He thinks. Response to him. Your March 17th, 89 response did not address my March 6th letter as follows. I ask you to forward the forms that you used to request the documents identified by document locator numbers and the forms you received back in response to those requests. You did not address that. I ask you to forward the documents that I requested by document locator number, not the transaction record thereof. You did not address that request. As of this date, I have not received not one document that I paid $85 for. Mr. Price, reviewing my request of October 31st, 88, and your responses since then, in the name of justice, the 85 should be returned post haste. I exhibited that the IMF NCC transcript dated 3/31/88 pertaining to me revealed that forms TYD-14 were executed to initiate an investigation to allege noncompliance regarding myself. You simply say we are unable to find any. Mr. Price, does the IMF document exhibit a false record? Please address the above enumerated requests that you failed to address in your March 17th response and respond to the unjustly charged fees. As to the 15 documents that you claim are destroyed, would you please send me the copies of the documents that authorize the destruction and a copy of the documents that shows that they were destroyed?
Prove it.
So what did he respond? He had his fill of this little correspondence. And he said, you can appeal it, you'll never get another answer from me. So we appealed it, went to Washington, D.C., and the appeals officer, and he came back and said, well, we can't produce the documents, so there's no sense going with the case. We admit that we can't produce the documents. All right? And that's where we stand. We're still in court. The case is still going on. The assessment arose in what year? Anybody remember what year the assessment arose in? 83. So here it is, 94, and the case is still in court, and it's still going on, right? And we're still getting information. I just got some pertinent information where I'm going to file another action. Now I'm going to file a 1361 action. Violation of federal law. I finally got, after I filed another FOIA action, they sent me a document that I requested a year ago, and it had the name of the tax examiner on it, on a 4665. Now, that's the person that said I owed all this money. Now I'm going to file an action against her, and then move to put her, to depose her, and ask her if she can substantiate all these figures and produce all these documents. See, there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? They are starting to feel the pressure in these courts. And we can see signs of big cracks coming. I mean, the pressure is there, believe me. It's all the judges can do to keep it up. I had a FOI request where it was 5 requests that they wouldn't respond to. I filed the action, and then after 27 days after I filed the action, I started getting responses and non-responses mixed in with them. You know, and the government answered right after that. It wasn't but 15, 20 days after they sent me these requests that the government answered. And boy, you talk about lying. I think I might have explained that before, but you talk about lying. I made a request in January of 1993 for a 4665 form. They sent me that request 27 days after I filed my action, which is in May or June of 94. From the date of my request until the documents they sent me, it was 518 days. When the government's attorney answered, he said that those documents were supplied. He said in a request made in January of 1993, the documents were supplied. He didn't say they were supplied 27 days after I filed my action, which was 518 days when they're supposed to supply them within 30 days. He wrote it as though I got them in 93. That's the way he wrote it, you see. Of course, then the judge wrote to him and sent me a copy saying, would you consider summary judgment? So what I did was I did an affidavit pursuant to Title 28, Section 144, which says when a judge is prejudiced or biased to one side or the other, then you can do an affidavit and remove him for such prejudice or bias by showing it in the affidavit. So I did an affidavit to remove the judge, saying that he was violating the neutrality of the court by giving legal advice from the bench. Right? So he comes back and says, that's the judge answered and says, I'm denying it. He said, we do this all the time. So I got to answer him now. I go back to him and say, you might do it all the time, but the statute says that you're removed. You can't deny it. The statute doesn't say it's elective on his part. It says when you do the affidavit, he is removed. The trouble is they can't read law. Or maybe they pick and choose the words within the law they want, as they want to remember it. But the law is very clear that they will be removed when you file the affidavit.
Yeah, but they nail us to the wall with the words.
They surely do, but they pick and choose which ones they like.
John, quick question. You made a reference to a Title 28, not the 144, the one before it. 3168?
Yeah, 1361.
1361?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're quite welcome. Okay, now we're going to go back to what we started this assessment investigation with, and this is your first test of the evening. We have here a certificate of assessments and payments. Remember we started with that? The certificate of assessments and payments. Now this here is the actual hard copy form. It's not a computer printout. A computer printout is a 4303 and the hard copy form is a 4340, form 4340. This gentleman here lives in Florida, and I kept telling him to go ahead and get your certificate of assessments and payments so you can start your investigation, right? And they kept telling him they didn't have such a document. It doesn't exist. So I told him, well, you got to keep being persistent. So he was persistent. So finally, after about a year of requesting it, they sent him this. Now this form has 3 fatal flaws. Now, from what you've learned so far, can anybody tell me the fatal flaws on this form? Yes, sir.
No assessed tax.
No assessed tax. Well, that's not a flaw. They say there's assessed tax is 0. That's called new math. See, when you get an addition to a 689 to 0, that's new math. All right? Yeah.
No document locator numbers.
There you go. No document locator numbers. See 'em? They left all the document locator numbers off. What's the other flaws?
Where's all the dates?
Dates. Here's your dates.
On the right.
Dates on your right. Well, here you got period ending 80. This is for the all tax year 80. Right? 23C date they say is 9/5/83, where they assess 0. Then on 286, which is 3 years later, they did an addition of 689 to 0. Only the IRS can do that kind of math. All right? What's the other two flaws?
Does this form here have to show that a return was filed?
Right, there you go. It's supposed to say the return was filed here, so that you could request a return. So instead they put an assessed tax instead of saying return filed. Remember that? Okay, now what's the last flaw?
It shouldn't come out of the district office.
That's correct. Where does it come out of?
Oh, the next level up on
Accounting branch.
Service center.
The service center, that's right.
Accounting branch.
The accounting branch of the service center, right? Who assesses the tax, and how's the tax assessed? Anybody remember that?
Chief of accounting.
The chief of the accounting branch. And how does he do it?
Personal
From
knowledge.
his own knowledge.
No, that's the secretary.
Oh, it is.
Yeah. How does he do it? How does he assess the tax? Remember?
From the return. From what you filed.
No. How is the tax assessed?
Right. Information that obtains from the taxpayer.
No. Anybody know how the tax is assessed? By his signing the Summary Record of Assessment 2162 and the Certificate of Assessment Form 23C. That's how the tax is assessed. Before he signs those documents, there is no assessment. Right? So what he assesses everybody for a given period of time. Like at the end of the week, he takes all the totals that are on 2162, which list the different categories of taxation, right? Whatever they are, income or excise, BATF taxes. And then they total them all up and put them on a 23C, and then he signs that, and that's the assessment. So on that given date, in this case, it was 9/5/83, he signed the 23C, and that was the assessment. All right? Now, you know, some people might say, well, you're saying all these things, and you know, as we always say, we invite you to prove us wrong. We continually tell people, whenever we do a talk show or give these talks, no matter where we are, we say, prove us wrong. And we've been offering $10,000 now since 1982 to prove us wrong. And we have yet to give the $10,000 away. Now, we go to great lengths to find out information before we publish it and before we use it. We don't use it till we know it's correct. Now, you know, we said before, if it was just a matter of arguing the law, I wouldn't be lecturing here tonight. The problem that we have is not arguing the law or the knowledge of the law, it's the courts. The biggest problem we have is the judges protecting the government in their wrongdoing. I received this letter just today. And it's from this law firm in Phoenix, Arizona. We thought you might be interested in it. I found it rather interesting. It says, Save a Patriot Fellowship, Dear Editor, I am writing you on my own initiative regarding your issue having to do with Internal Revenue levies. Court rulings strike at the heart of authority to levy, which is the title of the article he's talking about. Your article was sent to me by a client of mine who recently is a victim of the Internal Revenue Service levy. As an attorney for 15 years, I have dealt with the Internal Revenue Service on all areas, criminal, tax, audits, collection, etc. I find your article to be far more authoritative and accurate than most of the material that are published for the use by the legal profession, or for that matter, interested laypersons. He's talking about legal periodicals, that we have more information that was more accurate than what he gets from these legal periodicals in the law library. As one who has battled the IRS on all fronts for over 15 years, I think that it is very important that the approach taken by the Internal Revenue Service be understood by the United States taxpayer. Oftentimes, the approach that is used by the Internal Revenue Service ranges from unconstitutional to illegal to simply one of ignorance by IRS personnel. Is that right, Mr. Shannon? A watchdog attitude needs always to be maintained in regard to this particular agency, and I agree wholeheartedly. You can never let your guard down when you're dealing with usurpers of the law. Many years ago, it was common for me to encounter several organizations who sought to bring a higher level of awareness to the average taxpayer regarding the IRS. However, for whatever reason, a number of groups seem to have dwindled in the late 80s and early 90s, or at least are not as vocal as they once were. I am glad to hear that your organization such as yours is still active, at least in regard to the dissemination of accurate, reliable, and helpful information such as those contained in the above referenced article. I hope you will continue to provide such a service. This, we get these all. In fact, like I said before, we have lawyers fly from all around the country to come to us to learn the tax law. They don't teach them the tax law in the law schools. They're not taught tax law. They know nothing. Of course, you get some of these attorneys that you deal with who think that they're above everybody, when it comes to the subject of the law, and they don't want to hear anything. But any attorney that has an open mind and who reads the material or our arguments or our briefs tells us the same thing. In fact, one of our members is an attorney down in Louisiana, and the gentleman was given a copy of a videotape that we made, and he took it by saying, well, I'll prove it wrong. He says, everybody knows you got to pay the taxes. And he told me when he came up to visit us about a couple months ago, and he told me, he says, the more I tried to prove you wrong, the more you proved it right. He says, I was amazed. He said, you taught me more than 6 hours about tax law than I learned in 4 years in law school. They just don't know. Hey, it's not their fault. They are deliberately kept in the dark. The same way, we're going to be publishing a book, it seems at this point anyway, about Social Security, how it started, and how they got people to believe that they had these requirements when they actually don't have the requirements, and how they purposely worded the lies, the laws rather, which were lies, to misrepresent the fact about the law, that it appeared to be something that it wasn't. And they actually wrote back and forth to one another. How can you improve on this to make it seem that something that it's not? To get people to register. They even threatened them to telling them that the postman was going to arrest them if they didn't register. The postman. Honestly, I mean, it is wild. It's hard to believe, really. But we have really been a victim in the past 70 years of government treachery. And I'm not talking about the system of government. I'm talking about those who have run the government. All right, now we're going to go to the code section that we skipped with Notice 609. Remember Notice 609, the Privacy Act noticed their authority. We're going to go now to Section 6012. Persons required to make returns of income. What does it say? Returns with respect to income taxes under Subtitle A shall be made by the following. Every individual. So now what I've been telling you all the way up to now is wiped away, right? Because every individual owes the tax.
No.
Has to file a return.
No.
Huh?
Not every individual.
Not every, well, it says every individual having a taxable gross year of income which equals to exceeds the exemption amount. So the return shall not be required of the individual. Well, how can a return not be required of the individual who has income?
They want you to think it's you. They're giving you a mindset, aren't they?
Well,
They want you to think that you are that particular individual.
Well,
You may not be.
every individual would be everybody, wouldn't it?
Is there a difference between an individual and a person based on the definition you shared
Yeah.
earlier?
Right. A person can be an individual, right? And a person can also be a corporation. But an individual can't be a corporation or a trust or an estate. An individual is an individual human being. So a person could mean the same or it could mean other. Okay, so we say every individual having a taxable year. So everything that we said about filing and everything else is wiped away, right?
Does it have to do with the subtitle A? Is that the key?
Well, that's right. You only have a requirement where? In Subtitle A, right? How many subtitles are there?
6.
No, how many subtitles are there?
12, Daddy.
10.
10.
There are 10 subtitles. How many categories of taxations in the subtitles?
5.
5, that's correct. 5 categories of taxation. So you have 10 subtitles, 5 categories of taxation. So we're dealing with how many categories of taxation here? The requirement to file is 1 category of taxation out of 5. For who? For who?
Individuals under.
For an individual.
Right.
Okay. So the individual only has a requirement in 1 category, income tax. Right? And it's in Subtitle A. All right, let's go to Subtitle A and see how that's applied. Here we have the Internal Revenue title. Subtitle A is income tax, right? We come down here. The Subtitle A income tax, Chapter 1 is normal taxes and surtaxes. Come down to Chapter 1, normal taxes and surtaxes. Subchapter A is determination of tax liability. So this is on individual. That's where we want to go, right? Subchapter A. All right, we go down to Subchapter A, determination of tax liability. We go to Part 1, tax on individuals. Is that where we want to go? So we come down to Part 1, tax on individuals, and we go to Section 1, and it says the tax is imposed. So we've gone from Section 6012 to Section 1. What subtitle is 6012 in?
F.
F. Yeah, Administration and Procedures. Okay. What does Subtitle F do?
Implements the previous subtitle.
It implements the categories. Okay. It's not a category itself. It implements the categories. Right? It's all the code sections that, like 6012 says, you have a requirement to file a return in Subtitle A. It also implements other subtitles, Subtitle F. But in this instance, for the filing of a return by an individual, it's only in Subtitle A, which takes us to Section 1, Tax Imposed. All right, now, Section 1, Tax Imposed. Married individuals filing joint returns and surviving spouse, there is hereby imposed on the taxable income of every married individual who makes a single return jointly with his spouse under Section 6013, which is in what subtitle?
F.
F. Okay, that's F. So we're talking about married individuals filing joint returns, the taxes imposed on them. When you go forward, it also is on single persons, not married but single persons. Does this look familiar to you?
Oh, yeah.
Right? When you ever get a packet from the government with a 1040 in it, and in the packet you find this Section 1 is printed? Huh? Is that familiar?
They got me like it for many years.
Right. And you can come down here and it tells you just how to figure your tax, right? And it's every individual. Well, how do we determine what individual they're talking about? You think it's us? You think it's citizens? So far, everything we saw, that citizens are not the person, right? Now, huh?
Go to the definitions.
No?
What is the 7703? It says every married individual defined in Section 7703.
Yeah, married individuals defined in 7703. Well, that's defining a married individual, but it doesn't say more than that. That's in Subtitle F, too. All right. All right. Now, where do we go to find out who the individual is, or how do we find out who the individual is?
C?
Huh?
You go to C?
No, you don't go to C, you're in A. What do we do now to show who the individual is?
Is it the form?
Remember when we had Notice 609 up there? Remember Notice 609? That was a Privacy Act, Paperwork Reduction Act notice. What's the purpose of the Paperwork Reduction Act? Remember we went over that?
B numbers.
What is the purpose of the Paperwork Reduction Act
Supposed to make.
of 1980?
Less.
It makes less paperwork for the government. Well, what was the reason why it was passed, and how does it make less paperwork?
To prevent unauthorized persons from making unauthorized requests.
For information. To prevent government agencies from making unauthorized requests for information. That they had found that the government agencies were making requests for information from the public when there was no law authorizing it. So they wanted to stop it. So by stopping this, they're saving paper. It was called the Paperwork Reduction Act. So what they did is they took the Office of Management and Budget, which is called OMB, and they made them the police officer, the watchdog. And every agency had to submit the information request form they wanted to use to the Office of Management and Budget. And then the Office of Management and Budget would investigate the information request as to the authority for it, the code section, and if there was authority for the information request, they would assign it an OMB control number, which identified the form that was used for information requests, and it also identified the reg that implemented the statute. So if we go to the regulation, right, the Code of Federal Regulations, Title 26, and it's in Part 600 to end, we will find in 602, Part 600 to end, OMB control numbers. See up here at 602, OMB control numbers under the Paperwork Reduction Act. Purpose. This part collects and displays the control numbers assigned to the collections of information and the Internal Revenue Service regulations by the Office of Management and Budget under the Paperwork Reduction Act of 1980. The Internal Revenue Service intends that this part, together with 6001 601 rather, 9,000, which is right over here, comply with the requirements of 1320.7 and 1320. 12, 13, 20, 13, 14 of 5 Code of Federal Regulations, which is Title 5, meaning government agencies and employees. Part 1320 OMB Regulations, implementing the Paperwork Reduction Act. For the display of control numbers assigned by OMB to the collection of information, Internal Revenue Service regulations, etc. Now let's go right down and look at the regulation that implements Code Section 1. We find in Part 1 of the regs, see this is Part 600 up here. When you look for the part is before the period, the part of the reg. So this would be Part 1, Section 1, which implements Code Section 1, and then Paragraph 1. And it has an OMB control number of 1545-0067. Now, notice they all say 1545. That's a prefix identifying IRS forms. Whenever you see a form and it has a prefix of 1545, it means that form is from the Internal Revenue Service. If it doesn't have one, it's not an IRS form. Anybody ever see a W-9? What is a W-9?
Request for taxpayer identification number.
What OMB control number does it have?
None.
None. If it doesn't have an OMB control number, what is it? Is it an authorized request for information?
No.
No. Well, we'll get into that a little bit. So for Section 1, we have a 1545-0067 is the OMB control number, right? All right, now let's go on. Oops, and we'll look at Section 6012, right over here. Part 1, Section 6012-0, 1545-0067. Same number, right? All right. Well, when they send you out Section 1 through 3 in the packet, what form do they send you?
1040.
And it must be a 1040, right? Okay, here's a 1040. Where's the OMB control number for a 1040? It's in the upper right-hand corner, right? So what's the OMB control number for 1040? 1545-0074. Well, that's not 67, is it? Well, what return is used for Section 1? It's not a 1040. Well, why do they send you a 1040? Why do they send you a 1040 when it's the wrong OMB control number, according to their own code of regulations? Huh?
Save paper.
Save paper. I think they're wasting paper, right? Sending you the wrong form is a waste of paper. Let's look at this one here, maybe see what this one has. This has an OMB control number of what? 0067. And what return is it to be used with Section 1? 2555, foreign earned income. Why don't they send that out to you? And why don't they send this one out with a packet, which is the correct one according to the OMB and the Internal Revenue Service? Huh?
They wouldn't get a response.
They wouldn't get any response, would they? Or they might get some response, but it wouldn't be that much. Particularly when they looked at the exclusion. I think the exclusion is somewhere around 70,000, 80,000. They wouldn't get too much of a response, would they? Not only that, when the exclusion, the requirement is restricted to what? The requirement to file is restricted to what?
Non-resident aliens, countries.
Well, yeah, but as far as we're talking about citizens now.
Citizens earning money abroad.
Citizens earning money abroad. Well, that's correct. But with everywhere abroad?
No, just where we have a tax treaty.
Just where you have a tax treaty. So it's not everywhere abroad, it's just where there's a tax treaty. In fact, when we research Subtitle A, you know what we find out? Which we're going to show you. We find out that it's under tax treaty only. All of income taxes are foreign tax under tax treaties. It's not authorized outside of a tax treaty. When the withholding agent withholds from the foreigner here, it's under a tax treaty with what? The country the foreigner's from. So the whole thing is a tax treaty, tax conventions. Everybody understand that? All right, let's go forward. Let's look at some of the paperwork. Here's the request that was sent to the OMB from IRS, the Department of the Treasury, Washington. Milo Sanderhoff, he's the head of the Treasury desk at the OMB, Office of Management and Budget. And this Information Resources Management request for OMB approval for 1545-0067 foreign earned income 2555. Here's the SF-83 from OMB, which identifies the request and the code section. See it here, Department of the Treasury, Internal Revenue Service 0067. We come down here, foreign earned income, Title 26 United States Code, Section 911, 6011, and 6012. See it? Anybody know what 911 is in reference to? Section 911.
Is that a business return?
No. Section 911 is foreign earned income. All right, now what is it in reference to?
Gain from sale of land?
No. What does Code Section 911 pertain to? The imposition of taxes in the federal states. What's the federal states?
Puerto Rico, Guam, Virgin Islands?
The possessions of the United States. They're called federal states. And this is the 911 has to do with the collection of tax within the federal states. Okay, foreign earned income. Here's the reverse side of the SF-83, which the agencies use. And down on the bottom side, we see that we have the federal regulations, 26 CFR 1.1-1 and 1.6012-1. Or the regulations, right? For 0067. And of course it's mandatory for who? For whoever has foreign earned income. Now, we get into these debates back and forth with IRS agents, and revenue officers. And not too awful long ago, the debate went and was going back and forth, myself and this revenue agent. And he said that anybody who had gross income defined in Section 61 had to file a return. He said everybody, every individual, he said. That's what the law says. All right? So, of course, I had to answer the man, right? So, what we have here is Section 61. Now, this here is from the 1986 Code 1990 edition. And here it has the general definition, except as otherwise provided in this subtitle, of gross income means all income from whatever source derived, including, but not limited to, the following items. And right on down the line is the definition of gross income. See them? Compensation for services including fees, commissions, fringe benefits, and similar items. Gross income for business, gains derived from dealings in property, interest, rents, royalties, dividends, alimony, separate maintenance payments, annuities, income from life insurance, endowment contracts, pensions, income from discharge of indebtedness, distribute of shares of partnership, gross income, income respective a decedent, and income from interest in estate or trust. But that's all it says. Didn't say anything else, did it? All right, so I still have to answer him, so I started an investigation.
Let me ask you a question. When I look down here where it says last amendment and amended and talks about public laws, what does that have to do with the code itself?
Well, the public laws are supposed to be used over the code. See, that's the statutes at large, or public laws. You go down to the law library and look up the public laws, and then they're the actual, supposed to be the actual acts of Congress. Remember we went through this with the Records Division and all? And so it goes back to them where the codes are written out of that. All right, so now we're going to have to investigate that. But here you notice this is the 90 edition of the 86 code, and it doesn't take me anywhere, does it? Right here, I mean, I can read this right here, and I can't go anything but these public laws. I can't go any further than that. Well, the government does this all the time. That's why we have old editions of the different codes. And we keep them. We don't throw them away. In fact, we search and buy them from wherever we can get them. We pay as high as $40 to $60 to $100 for old code books. So here, I went back to the 54 code, the 1982 edition, which we have in the office, and I noticed that the definition is generally the same thing. See it? And when we come down to the bottom of this one, which is no longer in use, right? It's a 54 code. It says the source. This one gives us the source. When they rewrote the code, all they did was drop the source. Yet the definition stays the same, right? And what does it say? The source is section 22A of the 1939 code, substantially unchanged. So it's the same as 22A, the 39 code. It's the same way in the 86 code up to 94. It hasn't been changed. Everybody see that? Now, if we hadn't had the old code, I couldn't have researched to answer the gentleman. But now I have somewhere to go, right? 22A of the 39 code. Gross income. The outline's a little different, but it's substantially the same. Read it carefully. General definition. Gross income includes gains, profits, and income derived from salaries, wages, or other compensation of personal services. They seem to change that just a hair, didn't they? What is the difference between that and the one we just saw? Now, come on. Who sees the difference where it's changed just slightly?
I do, because they're giving you the salaries and wages originally as a gross income, when it's supposed to be, if you took the wages or salaries or whatever it is and invested it and got a capital gain out of it, that would be taxable.
No.
The word derived is the key. In other words,
Oh, yeah, the word derived is the key. Derived from.
But it can be derived from your employees.
Well,
Derived from your employees' salaries.
yeah, but not yours. What is income?
Income is a gain.
Income is a gain from capital or labor or a combination of both. Right? Income is a profit or gain from capital or labor or a combination of both. So what does this say about salaries and wages or compensation for personal services? It's changed just a little bit, but this says it's not, right? Derived from salaries, wages, and that doesn't mean the person who's getting the salary or the wage. It means his boss, who's getting a profit on his salary, wage, or compensation. Is it? It's derived from that. So of course, that doesn't go with the modern thought that the courts want to use and the IRS wants to use, so they try to wash away what was written. They say it's the same thing, only they leave certain parts out. Nowhere in the other one can you find the word salaries or wages, can you? They just left that out. Because they want you to think that the wage is the income. In fact, we have courts saying wages are income. But it doesn't say it here, does it, in the law? Right?
If instead of saying derived from salaries and wages, if it said receive salaries and wages.
No, it says includes gains, profits, and income, salaries, wages, and compensation, then it would be them. Okay? When it says derived from, it means it comes from.
The key word then is derived.
Well, isn't that in the 16th Amendment? Isn't the word derived from in the 16th Amendment? Isn't that the key word of the 16th Amendment?
That's a key word also in the Supreme Court opinion, right?
Well, that's not only did we find this, right, including persons or officers, employees of the state, or any political subdivision. I mean, this goes into detail. I mean, when you find the old laws that are unchanged, according to the IRS, they go into great detail. But the laws today, they go into great detail to eliminate anything so it's clear understanding. Right? They go to great lengths so you don't understand.
But John, when it goes on and says professions, vocations, trades, businesses,
Right.
is that not?
Derived from. Derived from. Income tax are derived from. Okay? Now we have to go on, so we know now that the guy's misrepresenting. He says, gross income, anybody who makes anything in the United States, he's telling me, as an individual, he owes the tax. That's what he's arguing to me. So now we're starting to get an argument together against what he's saying, right? We're ready to rebut him. But we've got to go somewhere else. We've got to go further than that. We've got to go through the parallel tables of authorities and rules. Where do we find them?
Index
That's right, in the index of what?
of the codes.
Of what code?
Title
Regulations.
26 in this case, right?
What? Of Title 26 of what? Code of what?
Federal regulations.
Of federal regulations. Now, it's not Title 26. It's the index of the 50 titles of the Code of Federal Regulations. It's the general index for all 50 titles. Now, each individual title has its own index, too. But there is a general index for all 50 titles where we have the parallel tables of authorities and rules. The following table lists rulemaking authority under Title V, which is government agencies and employees, right? Section 301, for regulations codified, and for the Code of Federal Regulations also included are statutory citations which are noted as being interpreted or applied by those regulations. So it cross-references the application of the reg to where it properly belongs. Now let's go look and see. We come down here, and we have Title 26 in the parallel table, right? 39 Code, 1939 Code. It's still there. And you know what it lists? Section 22. So we take Section 22, and it tells us to go to Title 20, or Code of Federal Regulations 26, Part 519. The OMB control numbers were in what part?
600.
602. And 600 and they're in part 602, right? But here we're finding the application of Section 22 of the 39 Code we find is in Title 26, Part 519. Now, what do you think Part 519 is? There it is right here. 26 Parts 500 to 599. Okay? So we go inside of 2600 Parts 500 to 599, and we find out that Part 519 is what? A tax convention with who? Canada. So in order to have gross income, it has to come from where? Canada. Does it still remain foreign? It's something else, isn't it? I tell you, they go to great lengths to misrepresent things, but you have to go around Robin Hood's barn to find out what they're talking about because they don't want to tell you. Now, you know they have to be hiding something, don't they?
That shows you right there.
Interesting, isn't it?
I don't understand why Congress has keeps asking for higher taxes when they must know that this is.
You think Congress knows this? Do you think Congress knows this?
Didn't they, like the 86 laws, didn't they write the new tax laws?
Do you think congressmen and senators, what do we say about congressmen and senators?
They're pretty bad.
Now, remember when we were going over the Library of Congress, Congressional Research Service reports? Why do they have them?
Because they're ignorant.
Because these have lawyers to look up these things, and they don't even know what it's all about. So when they get into a pickle and don't understand what's going on, they go over there and say, "Tell me all about it," so they can write you. Look, how do these guys get in office? They have to go through a political party because they have that money to run, right? And how do they go up in a political party? By doing favors, not by their knowledge. Not by wanting to do right. If they want to do right, then it wouldn't be all that, what do you think they hold office for? Why in the world, when I was on the police force, the commissioner made $15,000 a year. That was a lot of money, and we made $3,000 when I was on the police force. That was my yearly wage. All right? Now, they made $15,000, and it was well known through the whole police force that they would spend $45,000 to $50,000 to get the job, to pay the governor to get that job. Why do you think they would spend all that money to get that job that paid $15,000?
Once they got it, they're going to make a lot more.
Why do you think?
I guess from being paid.
Influence peddle.
We got one side.
Right? It's like the sergeant told me when I was on there for a year. He says, "We don't have trouble with the mafia. We run the rackets." I mean, that's just that simple. They have no trouble with the mafia in Baltimore. They never have. Right? No, never have any trouble. Not at all. All right. Now we're going to go to the 90 edition. What did I show you here? I showed you an older edition, right? The 88 edition. Now we're going to go to the 90 edition. And something has happened since the 88 edition. What has happened? 519 is now what?
Reserve.
What does reserve mean?
In other words,
Gotta look somewhere else.
It means reserved for future usage, right? What happened to the word Canada? Well, how come there's no treaty with Canada now?
Free trade.
They passed free trade acts, didn't they? There is no more treaties with Canada. So what happens to gross income? Huh? Not quite. They all mean they're creative. Don't think it went out the window. They're very creative. We did a cross-reference, which I should have made a transparency. We did a cross-reference in the 50 codes, and we came up with 61 now goes to Title 7. Title 7 United States Code. Agriculture. Well, why would it go to agriculture? What is the principle of benefits? All right, what do we talk about the principle of benefits? There's a principle of law about benefits. A benefactor, right? A beneficiary has no standing against his benefactor. In court. Why is that? You cannot sue your benefactor to give you more when he's given to you out of his grace, right? It's all grace. So you can't say, "I'm going to sue you and get more." You can't do that. So if the government gives you money for not raising hogs or money for not mowing hay, right?
Right, you're going to take it.
Or money not to grow corn, then isn't that a benefit?
Well, it is.
Right? Well, I guess you have no standing against your benefactor. That's the only thing we can figure. We haven't researched that one yet. But that's the new cross-reference. It goes to Title VII. We're going to have to get into that. It might be pretty interesting. All right, now we're going to show you the knowledge of those people in Congress. I'm glad you brought that up. I think that was God sent. I think God has His hands on these meetings. Or even when I'm on these talk shows, God has His hand there because I always get some lawyer or some CPA comes on and he's going to tell me about filing return. I mean, I just love it. I say, thank you, God, when they say I'm a CPA or a lawyer. I mean, they are the best ones to work with, believe me. You know, thank you, God. Anyway, I wrote a letter to Sam Nunn. Everybody hear of Sam Nunn? The senator from Georgia, who the media says is one of our brightest senators. Is that correct? I mean, he has talked about being presidential timber. Is that right? Is that how they promote this man? Well, I wrote Sam Nunn because Sam Nunn just proposed new tax changes, and I wanted to find out about it. See, so when was it? May of this year, I wrote him. And I said, Dear Senator Nunn, a friend of mine sent me a copy of your overview of the Nunn-Domenici tax proposal that he said was received from you. Along with that document was a letter from you to him dated February 24th, 94. In that letter, you state, under our proposal, individual income would be defined much the same as it is today. But taxpayers would subtract the amount they saved and invested from what they earned during that year. The balance would be subject to progressive tax rates, just as taxable income is today. By the way, this is the new sales tax that everybody's excited about. Okay? Is it what they think it's going to be? He says it's the same as what we have, doesn't he? And to ensure fairness, we would provide a generous exemption for spending on essentials as well as a credit to low-income Americans for payroll taxes withheld to finance entitlement programs. Huh? To fully understand your proposed tax plan, would you please answer the following questions? Okay. Would you please cite the Internal Revenue Code section or sections that the definition of income in your proposed tax plan are compared to be much the same as? 2, in your proposed tax plan, would the categories of taxation outlined in the present Internal Revenue Code subtitles be the same? 3, if the answer to question 2 is yes, would you please identify the taxpayers within your proposed tax plan that would subtract the amount they saved and invested from what they earned during that year? And 4, if the answer to question 2 is yes, would the generous exemption for spending on essentials be on income taxes or employment taxes or both? Please respond at your most earliest convenience. Thank you. The dear senator responded. He did. He just did. August 10th, 94. Dear Mr. Kotmair, thank you for contacting me in regard to Senator Domenici's and my proposal to replace the current tax code with a consumption-based tax code. Just the opposite of what he's talking about here. I don't think his fellow understands. I really not, I don't know, maybe he's a lot like this guy Biden.
Oh, dear.
What do they call Biden? The great what? plagiarized, right? He plagiarizes everything. All right. As you know, our proposal, the Universal Savings Allowance, USA, man, isn't that sweet? USA, boy. It's all-American tax plan. Allows individuals a deduction from the part of their income they save. And allows businesses a deduction from the amount of their new capital investment. Now, this guy understands the law, don't you think, Gary? Huh? You think he does? All right. The new deductions for savings and investment will, when combined with other key features in the non-diminishing proposal, clear the way for renewed economic growth. Hey, man, that man's right out here on par, boy. Look at this one here. Here it comes. Here it comes. Section 816 of the Internal Revenue Code defines income as any wages, salary, dividends, interest, income from the sale of property or other forms of compensation. Does it? Huh? While our proposal would not substantially change the categories of taxation outlined in the present Internal Revenue Code subtitles, they're not changed at all, are they? It would change the taxation of specific categories. In general, all taxpayers would be able to deduct all new net savings, and there would be a generous living allowance provided for all taxpayers. The allowance would be graduated like today's allowance to reflect status of family size. Unfortunately, I am unable to definitely answer all of your other questions at this time, as we are continuing to refine our proposal. I trust this addresses some of your concerns. What is 816 define?
We didn't look at 816, did we?
No, but anybody know?
It shouldn't cover Canada, right?
No, that was Section 61. Section 61 defines gross income. Now, he said Section 816 defines income, wages, salaries, right? What do you think it defines?
Foreign earned income.
No? What do you think it defines? I mean, look, this man is presidential timber. He knows what he's talking about. Huh? What do you think it defines? You tell me. Now, this guy's, he's knowledgeable. He's in the government. He's been there for years. He's a head of the Armed Forces Committee. He understands what he's saying. Huh? What does it define? Life insurance companies. You can't find the word wages in the whole thing. Now, these are the kind of people you have in Washington. Now, you know what happened, don't you? Can't you see what happened? He called up the IRS hotline to answer my question. Right? And he got some equal opportunity employment employee. Right? Who told him, well, it's 861, Senator. So he said 861 and signed the letter. Huh? 816. 861 said 816. It could have been 860. It could have been any of them, right? Brilliant people over there, don't you think? He's presidential timber. Not much different than the one we have now. Huh? You know what? I saw a bumper sticker that says, vote them all out. He re-elect no one. I mean, get the novice in there. We got a halfway chance with them. This guy's been in office for years. A respected senator. Introducing tax law. Right? He's introducing tax law. He's an expert, boy. So the first thing they do is they lie and say there's a big change when there isn't. And number two, they don't know what they're talking about.
Are you going to respond to that?
Oh, sure, I'll write him back. Larry says, well, write him back and let him get in deeper. Larry Beecraft, I read it to him over the phone the other day. He sat there and he laughed. He couldn't stop laughing. I mean, it is ludicrous. I mean, these are the people that are running your country. No wonder we're in the shape we're in. They don't know what it's all about. All right, now let's finish up Subtitle A with Section 5. Section 5 is cross-references relating to tax on individuals. Other rates of tax on individuals, etc. The rates of tax on non-resident aliens, see Section 871. Doubling of tax on citizens of certain foreign countries, see 891. The rate of withholding in case of non-resident aliens, see 1441. And the alternative tax, see Section 55. Now, where does it talk about tax on citizens within the states of the Union? It's not there. The cross-reference is just what we've been talking about, just what it shows. Subtitle A is a foreign tax laid under tax treaties. We're doing research now into the FDA, and we found the same thing with the FDA, Food and Drug Administration. There is no authority for the Food and Drug Administration within the United States. It comes under tax treaties. The FDA authority, the district director only has authority at the port of entry, period. Nowhere internally. Now you see how they take these treaties and they misapply them. That was created in 1912, we found. Interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, better, John. Since the income tax does not apply to the citizens, even if someone wanted to look up citizens and the fact it didn't apply, it doesn't have to say anything about it since the law doesn't apply to them anyway.
Well, that's how you prove it. You look up citizen. You look up the word citizen in the index, but what you have to do is you have to go to the annotated code. You know what the annotated code is? Anybody know what the annotated code is? Anybody who doesn't know what the annotated code is? All right. You have the code and you have the annotated. All the annotated code means after each code section, they annotate all the case law regarding that code section. So they'll give you all the cites of all the cases that involve that code section. Everybody understand that? All right, so that's the annotated code. In other words, I showed you a copy of Internal Revenue Code. It's about that thick. The annotated Internal Revenue Code is, it takes up the shelves because they insert all the case law for each code section. If you go to the index of the annotated code and look up citizen, and then when you look up citizen, it'll give you all the law and all the 50 titles relating to citizen. And then you follow it, the citizen, you go down to a title of income tax. And it takes you all the different code sections, and you'll find it's all foreign. All right? Then if you go to income tax, and then look up citizen in the reverse, and look up foreign earning, everything, it just keeps proving itself back and forth. It'll show you it's a foreign tax. So if you want to prove it, just go to the index of the annotated code. All right, now we're leaving Subtitle A, and we're going into Subtitle C. Remember we were talking about that no one who has never left the states of the Union, lived and worked in the state of the Union all his life, never paid an income tax? Well, that's where we are now. All right, to understand this, we're going to go back to Internal Revenue Code and look at all the subtitles. All right, the Subtitle A is income tax, right? And we find it in chapters 1 to 6. Now, we just saw in chapters 1 to 6 that it's a foreign tax. We just researched that, and we found out that the income tax is on the income of United States citizens, resident aliens in foreign countries, and foreigners here in the United States under treaties, right? Okay, it starts at Section 1 and goes on. Then we have the state and gift tax is Subtitle B, and that's chapters 11 to 13. Then we have employment taxes, which is subtitle C, chapters 21 through 25, where we're going now. But nobody can understand the code unless they understand the division of the subtitles. Most people that I've read their work have not divided into subtitles. And here they're trying to explain income taxes by relating them to sections within subtitle E. I mean, you cannot do that. A dog is not a cat and vice versa, and birds are not rats. The same right here. These taxes are all autonomous. You cannot mix and match these subtitles. Everybody understand that? If you're looking at miscellaneous excise, you go to D and you find it 31 through 47. That's where you find those chapters, 41, 42, 43, and 44, right? Alcohol, tobacco, and certain excise taxes is subtitle E, chapters 51 through 54. That's where you find all those taxes. Nowhere else do you find them. You do not find income tax anywhere but what? Chapters 1 to 6. That's where you find income tax. But now we're going to go to employment taxes, which are chapters 21 through 25. In order to go there, we're going to have to define all the legal terms, right? For employment taxes. Where do we find the legal terms for employment taxes? Anybody know?
Subtitle 6?
Yeah.
What, all?
No? Where do we find the legal terms for employment taxes?
Title 20.
Title 20. What's Title 20? Education.
So that makes sense.
Right. Why do you think they're in Title 20, education? Why aren't they in subtitle C or subtitle F of 26? I mean, that's the logical place for them, wouldn't you think? Huh? I would think so. I think I would have them in the title where the tax is used. But here we have the regs for Title 20. See it? Code of Federal Regulations, Title 20, and we're in section 404.1001. And here we come down and we find out that subpart K, employment, wages, self-employment, and self-employment income. Okay? Introduction. In general, your Social Security benefits are based on your earnings that are on your records. Records, I'm sorry. So, we find out, we have an inkling that it has something to do with Social Security, right? Well, let's go over here. Same section, 1003, we find employment. What does the word employment mean? Employment means, generally, any service covered by Social Security, performed by an employee for his or her employer. Right? So what is employment?
If you have a Social Security number, then you're employed.
If you have a Social Security number, that means you're what?
You're an employee.
Well, you're going to be an employee without a Social Security number, right?
No, but I'm just saying under this title, you would be considered an employee.
Well, they leave a word off, which right here. See, what work is covered as employment? And it goes on down, but what we want is a definition of an employee. Who is an employee? You must be an employee for your work to be covered as employment for Social Security purposes. You're an employee if you are a corporation officer, it's under 6, and common law employee, etc., but you have to have a number. So you become a what? A covered employee. You're not just an employee, you're a covered employee, covered by Social Security, right? So that's the difference. I can be an employee without a number and not be the covered employee who is the subject of subtitle C. Everybody understand that? All right, well, let's look at here now. Here's a term here we want to use. It's called wages. Right? 1041 is wages. The term wages means remuneration paid to you as an employee for employment unless specifically excluded. Wages are counted in determining your entitlement to retirement, survivors, and disability insurance benefits. So what are wages? Remuneration paid for Social Security purposes. Right? Everybody understand that? That's what wages are in Subtitle C. Do you find wages in Subtitle A? No. Wages are not in Subtitle A. Wages are not income taxes. The only place you find wages is where? Subtitle C. And what are wages for Subtitle C? Wages, remuneration paid for Social Security purposes, building credits for benefits. Everybody understand that?
Is this section here still under Title 20?
Oh yeah, we're still in Title 20. This is Section 404 of Title 20. See? Yeah, that's where we are. So everybody understands that, right?
So everybody that works for the government would come under Subtitle C.
Hmm?
Government employees come under Subtitle C. People that work for the government would then come under, or just...
Well, who do you think comes under
That's what
Subtitle
I'm
C?
saying.
Who do you think comes under Subtitle C?
Like Reno not paying her maid Social Security, would that be one?
Well, in order for Reno to pay her maid Social Security,
Wasn't Reno, was it? It was someone else.
no, it was a lady who was
Yeah.
Zoe Bear. There was a couple of them. Looking for another one here. Well, what do you think of the qualifications would be for that? Are there any qualifications for that?
From the definition, it says to build up good credits for benefits. So,
It's building credit for credits for benefits, right?
and don't they
So-
do that in the government?
so-
Is that what they did back then?
Is it a requirement to have a Social Security number?
No.
How do you know that?
Because you've been teaching.
Because I said so, huh? Well, how do you know there's no requirement to have a Social Security number?
Because it doesn't have an OMB number on it.
No. Look up the
Yeah.
law. There's no law from from last time.
Well, what is the law?
Social Security number for taxes. If you want.
No, what is the law that says that there's no requirement to have a Social Security number? Where do you find that law that says there's no requirement to have a Social Security number?
Would that be in that crops here?
Employment? No.
Well, the S5, doesn't it say that it's voluntary,
Yeah.
the application?
Yeah, we didn't get to that yet. It says it's voluntary use. The SS5 is. But where's the law?
So since it's a benefit, you can't be compelled to take a benefit?
That's right. You can't be compelled to take a benefit. See? All right. So there is no requirement. Is there a requirement to get an EIN number if you're an employer? If you employ people, is there a requirement to get an employer identification number?
No.
If you got foreigners, if you got non-resident aliens.
No.
No?
No. That's a withholding agent. Is an employer a withholding agent? Oh, no, I'm glad you brought that up. Is an employer a withholding agent?
No.
No. An employer withholds employment taxes, and a withholding agent withholds income taxes, and never the twain shall meet. A withholding agent operates in Subtitle A, an employer withholds in Subtitle C. It's a big difference between the two. An employer has to have an EIN number. Why is that? Why does an employer have to have an EIN number in Subtitle C?
The staff wants to be covered by Social Security.
Well, why would he have to have the number? I mean, that is a good question. Why would someone have to, if you're an employer, why would you have to have the number to operate with inside Subtitle C?
You have to have a method of, you have to volunteer.
Well, you have to volunteer. Well, that's correct. You make an application, so you're volunteering. It's not assigned to you. That's shown by the law requiring numbers. What law requires a Social Security number? Title 42, Title 42, Section 405, C, B, 2, I, double I. Okay? That's the law. What does I say? What does B2 say? The Secretary shall have the requirement to issue identification numbers to I, every alien entering the country. A number is issued to an alien. To I, an applicant for a Social Security number. Everybody understand that? It's issued to an applicant for a Social Security number. Okay? Now we understand that? There is no law requiring anyone to get an EIN number. Doesn't exist. So why is an EIN number needed for an employer to participate with employment taxes in Subtitle C? Well, it's an account number. Well, why is it needed for him to do that? Let's say I don't have one. Let's say I don't make an application for one. Can I participate in Subtitle C? No, I'm not authorized. When he makes the application, he volunteers to become a tax collector from the government. All right? Now, that's why he has to make the application, because he wants to, for his employees' benefits, he wants to participate in Social Security. Okay? So, if there is no law requiring this, then there must not be any law authorizing him to withhold or requiring him to withhold. There's one authorizing him to withhold, I'm sorry, there's no law requiring him to withhold. So he has to apply for the number because absent of a law requiring, such as a withholding agent, there's a law requiring him to act. In fact, the law makes him a withholding agent. Is that correct? It makes him a withholding agent. He doesn't volunteer to become one. The law makes him one. Remember we went through a scenario, that the story where I bought a house from Ronald Stringer, the guy pointing this thing at me. All right, I bought a house from Ronald. And Ronald is an Englishman living up on the Scottish border. Right? And he's living in Scotland. He's not living in Annapolis. He's living in Scotland. And I bought the house from him. And I paid him without withholding any money from him. Did I commit a crime? That's right. By my buying that house from him and having a contract to pay him, I become a withholding agent under the law. And I'm required to withhold 30% of that and give it to the IRS and report it. I didn't do an application to qualify for that. The law required it of me or of any citizen. Everybody understand that? But in Subtitle C, I have to make an application to get a number because there is no law in Subtitle C that requires the withholding of an employment tax.
In this tape, we learned that The legal provisions for filing substitute returns in Section 6020B are limited, and that because of this, the authority to file a substitute return does not extend to 1040s. Of course, as we previously explained, IRS employees do not necessarily obey the law, and despite the absence of legal authority, IRS employees fake the execution of 1040s for people who do not file. We also examined how they subvert this law and showed that, to do so, IRS agents ignore proper procedure and misuse forms and other documents in a manner that is not consistent with their intended purpose. This practice not only thwarts due process, but it damages a host of safeguards that would otherwise contain the IRS within the law. Nevertheless, it is important to realize that the IRS can be contained within the law, and that the key to exposing this practice and ending it once and for all is public awareness. This awareness must include not only a knowledge of the law, but knowledge of the methods used by the IRS to subvert the law, as well as a willingness to hold the IRS within the law. The acquisition of the fraudulent documents is one of the steps that is necessary to build a case against the IRS. Since it is crucial to case development, we detailed the methods by which the IRS records such process. We explained, for example, that when a document is executed, it is entered into a computerized system of records, which is designed to adhere strictly to the provisions of the law and implement proper procedures. Therefore, the type of information that the computer program can accept is extremely limited. Specifically, the program restricts such input to information on businesses that have an obligation to file the employment, excise, or partnership returns that we previously mentioned, and sometimes returns for individuals living and working outside the 50 states, or individuals with international obligations under tax treaties. However, there are no computer codes that would allow an assessment record or criminal investigation to be entered against any other individual. And since the law does not provide for an assessment of a tax against the income of a U.S. citizen who is living and working within the 50 states, neither does the computer program. If the IRS wants to investigate such citizens or assess a tax against their income, then the software must be tricked into accepting input. Indeed, that is exactly what happens. IRS employees enter inapplicable business codes into the computer system. This maintains the illusion of proper procedure and at the same time allows an IRS agent to enter a fraudulent assessment into the system of records. Fortunately, phony data leaves a trail of physical evidence, and such evidence can be used to develop a case against the IRS. We showed one of the ways this is accomplished when we explained that the IRS uses TYD-14 forms to investigate individuals, even though the TYD-14 applies only to business returns. When it is used to investigate an individual, the form TYD-14 constitutes physical evidence that the IRS misused forms, fabricated information, and distorted the proper procedure. Physical evidence of this nature is needed before any legal action can be taken, and it can be acquired because the Privacy Act allows individuals to obtain documents from the government that contain personal information. When any given document is executed and entered into the system of records, the documents are assigned DLNs, or document locator numbers. These DLNs contain a great deal of information. For example, document locator numbers indicate the IRS office, the type of tax, the ID of the document, the date, the use of the document, and the location of the document. DLNs make it easy for the IRS to find any given document if and when it becomes necessary, which of course it does if an investigation of improper procedure is made. After relating the information concerning the methods by which the IRS executes and maintains such documents, we explored a principle of law that is known as the law of presumption, which simply means that when an allegation is not rebutted, it is presumed to be correct. A practical application of this principle is its use in challenging the validity of any given assessment, because under the law, An assessment is presumed valid until proven otherwise. To rebut such a presumption, a knowledge of the procedures and documents becomes imperative. If the IRS says, for example, that a document exists and that they relied on information contained within that document for an assessment, then they are obligated to produce the document if and when the credibility of the document is brought into question. Under the law of presumption, there is no such thing as an irrebuttable argument. What's more, a document that cannot be produced is presumed to have never existed. And the inability of the IRS to produce the documents on which an assessment was based negates the validity of the presumption. All arguments and exhibits must be rebuttable. At least they're supposed to be. But we also mentioned that many judges have a tendency to assist the IRS whenever possible, even to the point of giving legal advice from the bench. As a matter of law, a judge is obligated to remain impartial. Advice from the bench violates this impartiality, and it is illegal. If this impartiality is violated, an affidavit can be filed against the judge to remove him from the case. Of course, we also explained that if a judge is prone to ignoring the law, then it is likely he will ignore the affidavit as well, which simply means that an individual must be ready to aggressively pursue such cases through the appeal process. In this tape, we also explored the legal provisions of the Paperwork Reduction Act, provisions that help citizens keep a watchful eye on their government. For example, the Paperwork Reduction Act prevents government agencies from making unauthorized requests for information from citizens. It does this by requiring the various government agencies to obtain approval for letters and documents that request such information. The mechanics of the procedure are quite specific. For example, an agency of the government must forward a request to the Office of Management and Budget, or OMB, to obtain permission to enforce regulations that require the collection of information. When they receive such a request, the OMB confirms that there is a law or regulation that authorizes the collection of the information and then issues a control number for the use of the form. When someone receives an information request from the government, they can use its control number to look up the law that requires the information and verify that the agency is making a lawful request. A pertinent example is the information collection request known as a 1040 income tax return. The OMB control number for the Form 1040 is 1545-0074, which can be used to verify the application of the law and determine the validity of the request. In this case, according to the regulations, we find that a citizen's use of the 1040 is limited, and that as far as a citizen's own income is concerned, the Form 1040 is merely a supplemental worksheet that attaches to the back of a Form 2555. But the Form 2555 is used by citizens to report foreign earned income, not income earned within the 50 states. And more importantly, as far as U.S. citizens are concerned, foreign earned income is the only income that is taxable. That's why, according to Part 602 of the regulations, the Form 2555 is the only return that would actually be required to report the income of a U.S. citizen. And even this requirement is limited because the income tax that is imposed on the foreign earned income of U.S. citizens stems from tax treaties with foreign countries. And not all countries have tax treaties with the United States. Therefore, not all income earned in foreign countries is subject to such requirements. However, as we mentioned before, the income tax laws are often confused with the employment tax laws. These employment tax laws are also limited in application. To understand these limitations and the extent of any legal obligations, we took a more detailed look at the connection between employment taxes and income taxes, starting with a basic tutorial into the structure and application of the tax laws. We explained, for example, that there are 10 subtitles within the Internal Revenue Code, and that there are 5 categories of taxation within the 10 subtitles. We also pointed out that the tax on income, or income tax, is in Subtitle A, while the tax on wages, or employment tax, is in Subtitle C. Specifically, The provisions for administering income taxes are found in chapters 1 through 6, and the provisions for administering employment taxes are found in chapters 21 through 25. We also explain that, contrary to popular belief, they have little whatsoever to do with one another. For example, the taxpayer who pays the income tax is the withholding agent, while the taxpayer who pays the employment tax is the employer. The obligations and the legal requirements for each of these taxpayers is quite different, and there's a great deal of misunderstanding even among legal professionals as to how these laws are applied. To clarify the difference, we began a more thorough analysis of the employment taxes and explained that wages and income are inherently different. For example, a wage is something that is received in return for labor, while income is something that is received as a result of a capital investment, like dividends, rents, or interest, etc. But the most important distinction is that for the purpose of administering these provisions, the term wages is defined by the law and limited to employees who voluntarily submit a W-4 to allow withholding and bill credits toward Social Security benefits. These particular employees are also defined by law. An employee with a Social Security number who submits a W-4 is called a covered employee, as opposed to an employee, and the wages of covered employees can be subject to the employment tax in Subtitle C. But the reverse is also true, because employees who do not have Social Security numbers, who have not submitted W-4s, are not covered employees, and the earnings of non-covered employees are not subject to the tax. In fact, no law actually requires the withholding of employment taxes, because employers are not required to apply for an employer identification number to become the employers who are defined by the law and obligated to withhold, unless, of course, they want to voluntarily participate for the benefit of their participating employees. This information is becoming more widely known, which may explain why there is now a great deal of pressure to abolish the income tax. The reason for this should be self-evident. The IRS cannot continue to misapply the law when the people are willing to assert their rights. Furthermore, an increasing number of Americans are becoming informed. Many are coming to the conclusion that we must return to limited government, a government that is free from the unconstitutional burden of redistributing wealth and free also from the corruption that accompanies it. We expanded on this theme and showed just how far this corruption has gone by revealing that during the course of rewriting the text of various laws, legislative attorneys sometimes eliminate the footnotes. When they do, references to original source law are often omitted. Of course, this prevents researchers from determining the extent of any limitations that were part of the original intent of the law. And when this happens, it is easier to promote a private agenda that allows for the misapplication of law. In turn, the misapplication of the law provides the momentum that is necessary to conveniently bypass constitutional protections. This practice has been effectively used to create a socialist system within the legal framework of a constitutional republic, even though the two concepts are mutually incompatible. It is a marriage that has definitely not been made in heaven, and one that is entirely dependent upon the ignorance of people who want something for nothing.